Hello, art historians. We are back for the first of two videos on the Romantic period of art. So we're still in later Europe, but this is later Europe, the Romantic period. And it's important that we understand before we even get started what Romantic period means. We really have to talk about romantic with a big R versus romantic with a little r. So what am I talking about? So romantic with a big R. Let's do it. How do I want to describe it? So let's do it this way. Romantic is like, oh, I love you, and a book that's all like, oh, and she walked into the room and his eyes were on, like that. Or I'm going to bring you flowers, right? That's like romantic in like the little r. Romantic big R, okay? So the romantic period of art, the romantic period of literature deals with sort of we call it the five tenets of romanticism, okay? There is a huge importance on imagination. There is a huge celebration of the individual, like the person, like the individual person, as individual people, not as a species or a race, but as individual humans. There is usually a sense of awe about nature, awe and wonder. There is a strong pull on your senses, your emotions, and your feelings, like really like wrapped up in those. It's all about the feelings and emotions. Okay, so much emotion. And there's usually an interest in like the common man, right? Like the regular guy, like not, it's not always important people. It's just the common person and what happens in the everyday life. Okay. So little r, big R. Little r is, oh, I love you, here's some flowers. And big R is imagination, individual, nature, feelings, and common man. Okay. One more time. Imagination. I'm going to go a little slower. Okay. The celebration of the individual, an awe of nature, strong emotions, feelings, whatever those emotions, feelings are, strong ones, okay? And a real interest in the common man, or even children, okay? So those are the big five. All right. Big R versus little r. Okay, I think I gave you enough time to write that down. And you can always rewind. All right, so let's start with our romantic. A lot of French, by the way, so much French. Okay. Jean-Auguste Dominique Ang. That's how it's Ang, like E-N-G, Ang. Okay. Okay, painted in 1814. All right. Oil on canvas, 3 feet tall by 5.5 feet wide. Le Grand Odalisque. Okay, so we have to start with the title. Okay, so the great Odalisque. What is an Odalisque? It's a woman in a harem. Okay, so when we think about what a harem is, we're thinking about Middle Eastern, okay, where many of the rulers, sultans, and things like that could have multiple wives and women in the harem, like women that were kept for like entertainment purposes. And so what you're dealing with is, it's really important that we think about the idea that we're dealing with French colonization, right? At this time period, the French were colonizing all over the place. And there is an interest in exotica, exotica, not erotica, exotica, which means things that are in far away exotic locations, like the Middle East. Okay. And often art of this time period is meant to sort of justify French colonization and the idea that, like, look, here are all these people and we have brought them these amazing things and we are making them more civilized. Now, what you're looking at while she is called La Grande Odalisque is the Western idea of what life would be like for a woman in a harem. This is not what it would have been like for a woman in a harem. It is not this beautiful and sumptuous and wonderful. They were not treated well always, right? So, like, we're dealing with, this idealized conception of what it was like. And the reason we have this idealized conception of what it was like was so that the French wouldn't feel bad about colonizing everywhere, right? So let's look at what we're looking at and who we're looking at. So Ang is really famous. He's super, super, super famous. And he was hired by Napoleon, yes, that Napoleon, to paint his sister, Napoleon's sister. And Napoleon's sister was married to the King of Naples, one of the city-states in Italy. And by the time this was finished, Napoleon was no longer in power. They no longer had power in Naples either. And Ang needed to find another buyer for this piece. So this is at the Louvre, by the way, in case you want to know where it is. So this is at the Louvre. He needed to find another buyer. It was shown, and people were like, oh my gosh, we can't look at this. That's not Eve or Venus. You're not even trying to hide it, right? Because remember, our last nude was the Venus of Urbino, right? We could at least lie and say she was a Venus, right? And that got us away. This is straight up a nude woman who is not a goddess or Eve. It was a scandal, absolute scandal. People were scandalized by this. And they were scandalized by this even more because she's not, like, all her parts aren't showing. She's like, you can see a hint of her breast, you can see a hint of her buttocks, but really you can't see all of it. She's definitely inspired by mythological paintings of Greek goddesses, absolutely, without a doubt. She's also mildly influenced by mannerism, because once you really start looking at it, you're going to see that, like, her proportions are really not right at all. So what we're looking at here, because remember, we're in the romantic big R, is we're looking at that stuff that's like the senses and emotion and, all of those things, the individual. So we're focused on her. She's not a goddess, she's a person. And we're focused on her. We're focused on our imagination because we're trying to think about, like, what it's like there in the Middle East and stuff like that. We're looking at, it's probably Turkish. That's probably where we're based here, is in Turkey. We see an incense burner off to the side here. We see she has the fan that's made of peacock feathers. She has a turban here on her. Okay. Then this is the incense burner here with the legs. This is a pipe, like that we would use now for hookah. So that's a hookah pipe. So we have all this very exotic Turkish stuff. Her face is very much based, is very, very influenced by Raphael, the guy that did the School of Athens, very much based on the way that he painted faces, almost angelic, the face there. And we see that there is this is that idea again. I keep coming back to it, the idealized version of a woman in a harem. We have this imagined luxury, this imagined sensuousness. Look at the fabrics and the here's her dress off to the side, with a piece of jewelry, but she's there nude with her fan and her bracelets. We have the idea again, sensuality, not sexuality, sensuality, this senses, right? But we're looking here at there's like sort of this tension here. We see her, she's staring at us, but she's also turned away from us. So there's this sort of aloofness to her. And I want you also to look at the idea that kind of like the Venus of Urbino, anatomical correctness is secondary to the sensual nature of it, right? Her back is a little too long. Her legs are not quite right. The bend of this leg over top of the other leg is wrong. It just doesn't feel right. Her arm also appears to not really have a defined elbow. It kind of, it's that Elastigirl arm again. But when we're thinking about romantic with a big R, this hits a lot of our boxes. It's sensual, it's the individual, it's our imagination of what it is like to be in these exotic places. Okay. Now we're going to go from, the exotic, idea of a Turkish harem that is painted by a French guy. And here's our reclining nude. Here we have another reclining nude. We're going to go to something that is a totally different version of romantic, okay? Because romantic doesn't always have to be sensual in this kind of way, okay? Then our next one is this, okay? So they give you the title both in English and in Spanish, Y no hay remedio, and there is nothing to be done, from Los Desastres de la Guerra, from the Disasters of War, which is a whole series of pieces, okay? And this is number 15. And if you want to know how many there were 82. There were 82 total images. And so this is number 15 of the 82. All right. So I'm giving you a minute. Goya, Francisco Goya is your artist, and this is etching, dry point, burin, and burnishing. So we're looking at etching and dry point. Gives us a lot of that detail, and the burin is what lets us cut it in, and the burnishing is what allows us to polish so that we can get the really bright whites and the really fine lines. Okay. So here we have, and there is nothing to be done, okay, from the Disasters of War. Now, because this is a really detailed piece, it's only 5.5 inches by 6.5 inches. And again, we're dealing with dry point. So we're dealing with like fine lines on a metal plate. And I want you to be able to see the details. So I'm going to go to the next one, which is a blow up, of expansion of this, right? So when we're looking at it, I want you to know what historically is happening here. So this is a group of works that Goya worked on, called the Disasters of War, from 1810 to 1823. And these images are about Napoleon and the rebellion of the Spanish against the French, and the attempt of the Spanish to fight against the French troops that are keeping them down. Because what had happened was, sorry, I just made myself laugh. What happened was Napoleon is the emperor of France. He's not the king, he's the emperor. He makes himself emperor, and he makes his brother the king of Spain. So Napoleon makes his brother the king of Spain. And so now basically France runs France and Spain. And the Spanish don't want to be ruled by the French. They want to be independent. And it's terrible. And Napoleon is not a good ruler, and Napoleon's brother is not a good ruler, and bad things happen to them. And they are rebelling against, or they're trying to rebel against the French troops. And so what you're seeing here is one of 82 images that Goya created that were never printed or released until long after he was dead. They were actually not even published until 1863. Did I have that on the front thing? Oh, sorry. Yeah, published in 1863. So they were published 35 years after Goya died. And the reason is because if Goya had printed these and released them, what the soldiers are seen doing here to the Spanish rebels, they would have done to Goya. So Goya paints a couple of different things. He paints the Spanish royal family, but he also paints these sort of things too. And so I want you to look at, this is political stuff. Romantic art can also be that appeal to the emotion, and that emotion can be sorrow and anger at what you're seeing. It is the focus on the individual and what these individual humans are willing to do. It is the focus on the everyday man and what these everyday people are trying to do to stand up to emperors and kings. Okay. And so what you're looking at is, let's look at it. Let's take it apart. Okay. You see these French soldiers here. They're identifiable by their hats, right? You see the French soldiers here, and you can see them pointing their guns, but the barrels of their guns are hidden behind this guy, but they're shooting this person here and this person here, these people that are tied to these wooden stakes. Okay. Now, what's interesting about the composition is we see the soldiers and we see the guns, but we can't see the barrel of the gun because it's behind him. But look here, these lines are the barrel of the gun coming in from the side. And this barrel of the gun will shoot this man, the same way that the barrel of these guns shot this man that is already dead on the ground with the blood coming out of him and his eyes are open and there's blood on the ground. Okay. So what you're seeing is men being tied to these stakes to be shot and killed. That is very much religious imagery here. Goya is trying to get you to, sorry. Goya is trying to get you to pull up that idea of Christ on the cross here, right? We're looking at people being slaughtered. Okay, we're looking at these men who are being defeated, but are facing their deaths with honor. And we see lines of soldiers shooting men who are, blindfolded and tied to these sticks. And it's, it brings about these images of these Spanish patriots being slaughtered by these French soldiers while Napoleon is trying to keep his brother on the throne as the king of Spain. And so our theme here can be the suffering. Our theme here could also be, etching. Your medium is etching, so you could compare it to, Rembrandt and Krennic and some of those guys, right? But I want you also to think about, the religious symbolism. We can talk about religious symbolism. Now, I know that this is what they gave you is one of the 82 pieces from this series, but this one in particular, because there is no remedy, was actually the basis for Goya's probably most famous painting. So the painting that Goya did is then this one. And Goya creates this painting the 3rd of May to show you a more fleshed out version of this, right? So here we have the etching, and here we have the painted version, and here we still see the hats, and we see the guns, and we see the people on the ground, and there's blood, and we see the people that are about to be shot, and here we really see the Christ imagery of his hands up, and they've just taken them out to the woods, and they're shooting them, and they're going to just let them fall on the ground, and this becomes a piece that Goya becomes very famous for. Now, this is not one of your pieces in the AP curriculum, but I think that it's really important that we see that Goya begins with this and ends with this, right? Okay. This is also not one of your pieces. This is called The Raft of the Medusa. This is one of the most famous pieces in all of Romantic art. And I can't teach Romantic art without showing it to you. So this is The Raft of the Medusa, not one of yours. And it's a really cool story. 1816, a merchant vessel crashes off the coast of Africa. The captain tells men to build a raft because there aren't enough lifeboats. He ties the raft to one of the lifeboats, but then there's a storm and the captain cuts the rope, and there are 150 men on this raft that is just out in the ocean and lost. And they're actually lost for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, there are only 15 of the 150 that live. And what you're seeing here is in the very far distance, they think they see that little dot there. They think they see a ship, and they're trying to gesture. And so when I say romantic with a capital R, you're imagining what's happening and the suffering that's going on here. It is the focus on the individual, because you have these little compositions of this father who's holding the body of his dead son, and these people who are trying to, gesture. Look at the way that you are in awe of nature here and what nature can accomplish. This is very strong emotion. And these are just everyday people. So this is The Raft of the Medusa. I love it. I can't teach romanticism without teaching it to you, but it's not on your test. All right. This is probably the second most famous romantic painting of all time, and this is called Liberty Leading the People. Now, before I start, I need you to know that in 1830, there was what we call the smaller Second Revolution. Okay, this is not the big French Revolution of 1789. This is the smaller Second Revolution of 1830. Make sure you know that, because it's important. Okay, so you're looking at oil on canvas. It's giant, 8.5 feet by 10.5 feet. Okay, and your theme here is symbolism, national symbolism. You can absolutely compare this to Henri IV receives the portrait of Marie de Medici, because this is a personification of France, a personification of liberty. You can compare them. So this is, this is a smaller French Revolution. This is in July of 1830. There was a revolution of a few people that rose up against Charles X and the constitutional monarchy. They made a barricade. The streets are very narrow in Paris, and so it was easy to block them. This is we're dealing with the monarchy had been restored. So we had monarchy, and then we had republic, and then we had Napoleon, and now we have the monarchy again, and the monarch, the king, Charles X, is just horrible. And so this is when they rise up against Charles X. And so because what was happening at the time is the government, under the rule of Charles X, would go into homes of people that were opposed to the government and would take out their families and kill their families. Like, horrific stuff is happening. And so what you see here is the enactment of a revolution to stop Charles X of France. And so we have to look at our imagery and think about like what's happening here. And so, and we need to think about what is accomplished, and we need to think about how France becomes the France we know now, with like a prime minister and stuff like that. And so this is all part of that. This is all part of that. The July Revolution is what it is called. And so we're looking at people trying to free themselves from this just horrific reign of this tyrant king. And it is a beautiful image, because what we see is really we're closing in. We're closing in on there not being a king anymore. We're getting close. We're getting close. And so we're trying to overthrow the monarchy, and they are not, unfortunately, successful. But it is still liberty leading the people. And so let's look at it. We have liberty in the front. Why are her breasts clear? Exposed? Because she is a mother, and she brings more children into the fight of liberty, and children being her children, the grown-ups. These are her grown children, and she is leading her children into the charge, right? We see that a lot of different kinds of people are clear here. All right, on her head we see a red sort of kerchief hat thing. And this was symbolic in the ancient world of being worn by freed slaves, people who had been slaves that were then made free by their owners, like in the ancient, like in Greece and Rome and stuff like that. And they would wear this hat to show that they were free. We have the beautiful pyramidal structure where this, our eye is drawn up and then our eye is drawn down, and this beautiful pyramidal structure. It's wonderful. We see this clearly middle-class man, upper middle class. He's got his top hat. We see a child here who is, is representative of the students of all ages, really young and college age. We see the bodies of royal troops on the ground here. Here's a piece of the royal troop there, like you can see his uniform there. And so we see bodies of the royal troops there. It shows that the royal troops are not invincible, right? They can be killed. And we see more men charging. The tricolor flag, the blue, white, and red, is liberty, equality, and fraternity. And we see that in the background, it tells us, okay, so this is one of those compositional things. We wouldn't have been able to, probably wouldn't have seen, based on where they were charging during this blockade, we wouldn't have been able to see Notre Dame, but there's Notre Dame in the background to let us know that we're in Paris, okay? And so this is, we're working our way towards not having a king anymore. And what I need to tell you is in 1848 is the first time that this picture is shown. And in 1848 is when the monarchy ends. That is when there's no more king. And so it's really important that we realize that there is another revolution of 1848 that actually does end the monarchy. And so this is one of those, little minor skirmishes that sort of moves the people towards that. Okay. And so this is called the July Revolution, and it's not successful, but Eugene Delacroix, he paints it, but it is not shown anywhere until it's legal to do so. Until there was no monarchy, and it was safe. And so it's a really motivational piece. So let's look at our 5 pieces of romanticism. We definitely are using our imagination. We are seeing these people rise up against the government, which definitely focuses on the powers of the individual, of students, of lower class men, of middle class men. We don't see as much of the awe of nature, but we do see sort of that scrumbled sky. Definitely strong emotions, patriotism, bravery, that sort of thing. And it's definitely a focus on the common man, the everyday man. Now, while this was going on in France, Romanticism looks a little different in America. And so here we go. All right, so this is, it's such a change from one to the other, but here we go. This is called the Oxbow, and it has a huge, long title. It's also called the Oxbow, View from Mount Holyoke, Northampton, Massachusetts, after a thunderstorm. You would be just fine if all you knew was the Oxbow. So this is painted by Thomas Cole. He's an American. He is the founder of what is called the Hudson River School, which is a group of painters that were based in New York City. And so we talked about schools when we did, the school of this or the school of that. So these were just a bunch of painters that were based in New York City that painted sort of American imagery. Now, here's the thing. If you ask Americans, Thomas Cole is an American. If you ask the British, Thomas Cole is British. And that's because Thomas Cole was born in England, but he moved to the United States with his family when he was 17. And so he's frequently grouped in with American artists because all of the stuff that he painted was American. So let's talk a little bit about some history stuff. So at this time, 1836, we're dealing with what we call manifest destiny. The idea that the United States needs to go out and go west and spread and Western expansion and go take everything that is in America and go, right? And while this doesn't seem to be a painting about take everything that is in America and go, it is. And it's a little bit hard to see until I break it down for you. And then once I do that, you're like, oh, I see it. So this seems to be a view of the Connecticut River, right? Here we have the Connecticut River. That's what the river is, winding around through this area of Massachusetts. An oxbow, the definition of an oxbow, is any time a river does this, where it makes like a little loop. Why it doesn't just go straight, we don't know, but it makes like a loop around some land and keeps going. So that's called an oxbow, right? And so it looks like it's just about the river winding through the landscape of Massachusetts. That is not what this is about. I'm hoping that you noticed that this painting seems to almost split itself down the center. Okay? And if you didn't, now you have. It's like there are 2 separate compositions going on here. Okay? On the right side feels very classical. It's a classical landscape, right? It looks almost a little bit like Hunters in the Snow with the stuff in the distance, and you can see stuff in the distance. Okay? I'm going to switch to the next page so that you can see a little more clearly. Oh, look, now see when I do that, it's real clear, right? That's the right side, that's the left side. And you can see little villages here. You can see that this is planted. You can see like little houses and things in the background. It's all very nice, right? So the right side is very classical. Okay? The right side is peaceful. The right side is pastoral, which means like farming. It is controlled by man. Man has conquered this part of the land, okay? There are domesticated animals. We can see some farm animals on some of these areas. right? But when we look at the left-hand side, I'm going to go back to the original. When we look at the left-hand side is where we get into our romantic stuff, right? We are looking at clouds and storms and danger and virginal landscape that hasn't been touched by man. It's wild, and there's shrubbery, and there's knocked over trees, and it's craziness, right? And that's because on that left-hand side, where it's that romantic side, that is west, right? That's west. Go west, manifest destiny. Go take what is there and make it ours, right? Go out and explore the land and conquer it and make the west look like what's on this side, on the right side. And so let's scroll back again and see them. Look at the difference between the chaos of nature, untamed nature, untouched by man, untamed nature, versus the pastoral. And then we get right here, and it's awesome. This is like a little umbrella, some little bag here. And here is Thomas Cole walking up the hill to put his easel right here and paint. And this is awesome because here we have the artist painting himself into this canvas. And notice that he's over here on the wild side, right? He is over here. He's got a little bit of cleared path, but he is also, in this area of, the things that are new, finding the things that are new, going forth and trying new things, right? The American ideal of manifest destiny. Landscape painting becomes incredibly popular in the United States in the 19th century, to the point that it is like national pride. Like landscape painting is a huge deal. Also a little bit in England, but really the Americans took it to like the ultimate degree. And the reason that they did was because they were finding new landscapes. They were going west. They were finding new places. And it's awesome, right? So landscapes become a genre here that is becomes high art. Landscapes had been high art in other parts of the world, but landscapes become high art in the United States and England in the 19th century. So what's romantic about this? So we go back to our 5 tenets of romanticism. Let me go back to the big one when we do we're definitely using our imagination. Okay, we're look at all of the stories that we can come up with here. There is a focus on the individual, particularly the artist here, right? There is definitely awe of nature. I mean, nature is powerful. And there is a sense of emotion, whether it be the calm and comfort of, this beautiful pastoral, or the chaos of the storms. There is something to be said for the emotional response to what you see there. So that is romantic. Now, the next piece is also romantic and is British and is super, super, super powerful, and kind of a seascape, but kind of not. This is at the MFA, the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, if you ever want to go see it. I have looked at it a million times on screen. And then I saw it when I went to Boston, and wow, there's no reproduction that has ever done justice to this piece in to see it in person. So it's another one that has a short title and a long title. So the title is Slave Ship, okay, by Joseph Mallard William Turner. Oftentimes we see his name just written J.M.W. Turner. That is the most frequent way to see his name. Turner painted Slave Ship, also called Slavers Throwing Overboard the Dead and Dying, Typhoon Coming On. Okay. So, story time again. So, sometimes dates are important. Okay. So, in 1833, slavery was outlawed in the British colonies. In 1848, slavery is outlawed in the French colonies. We realize that the American colonies don't get on board until after the Civil War in 1865, right? So there's some dates. We also have to discuss the fact that Turner was an abolitionist. He did not believe in slavery. He believed that slavery was bad, and he believed that any country that participated in slavery was evil. So that's another thing. Turner often wrote poems about things that mattered to him. And what you're dealing with is a painting based on a poem that Turner wrote, which was based on an actual event that happened. So here is story time. In 1781, a boat left Africa to go to England with slaves. Okay? Or not to England. I'm sorry, not to England. Sorry, to the United States with slaves, to the British colonies. But they were not the British colonies. They still were actually the British colonies in 1781. So yes, to the British colonies. All right. Now here's the deal. And this is something that's really important that you have to know, because you got to know a little bit of history. Okay. If you were a boat captain and you were moving, and please know that I'm putting this in air quotes, merchandise, meaning slaves, from Africa to the New World, you were concerned because sometimes your slaves died on the way from Africa to the New World, or from Africa to Portugal, or from Africa to Mexico. And yes, they brought slaves to Mexico. So, and the British Virgin Islands, all slaves there too. Right. So there were rules in place to help boat captains have insurance. Like, you have insurance on your car, you have insurance on, like, if you own something really expensive, like diamond jewelry or a really expensive painting, you can get insurance so that if something happens to it, the insurance company will pay you back for it. Now, here's the deal with insurance. Insurance was only covered if slaves were accidentally drowned. Insurance did not cover slaves dying from bad treatment or malnutrition. Because what the insurance companies were sort of trying to do, were trying to prevent bad treatment of the slaves on the transatlantic crossing. Okay? Now, here's the deal. When this rule was put into place, what happened in this real honest to goodness thing that happened was in 1781, this boat was crossing from Africa to the New World. And a storm is coming. And the captain thinks about it for a second and realizes that he can take the slaves that look sick and throw them overboard. And the ones that died from being malnourished or having an infection, he can throw them overboard and get the insurance money. And that's what he does. Okay. So he instructs the crew to take the dead, but more importantly to this painting, the dying, the ones that are not dead yet, but are clearly not well and will probably not survive the passage to the New World. He has his crew throw them overboard. Because by doing that, when he gets to the New World, he can say to the insurance company, there was a typhoon and we were flooded and some people were washed overboard. Now can I please have the insurance money for the 100 slaves that I lost? And so he tried to collect on the insurance policy, except they told on him. They ratted him out. Some of the people in the crew were so disgusted by what happened that they told on him. And what you see is a seascape. So here's this beautiful, like, red on the water, and you can see the boat in the waves, and you can see that the sky is getting cloudy. And it looks from at first glance like a beautiful seascape. It's not until you get closer that you start to figure out what is happening. And so here's the boat, and here are some shackles, and here are some arms and legs, and I'm going to zoom in some, and it's a little bit disturbing, and I'm really sorry. But here you see some fish, and here you see a leg sinking into the ground with a shackle on it, and the fish eating the body of the person that's been thrown into the water. That's a breast, a woman's breast, right? But when you look at just the boat, that is a beautiful sunset. If it was just this, right, it'd be beautiful. You see birds coming in to attack the body. You see fish eating the body. You can see the legs sticking up. I'm going to zoom in a little on a different piece. Hold on. Here you see hands sticking up out of the water, and more fish coming, and you see the chains. It's a horrific image. I mean, it really is just horrible. And what you're that's what you're looking at. You're looking at what appears to be this beautiful sunset and this beautiful power of nature. But really, Turner, who was an abolitionist, was trying to show you that while nature is powerful, humans are horrific. And that the bad things that happen in this painting were not brought on by nature. They were brought on by humans. And so Turner found out about this event, and he wrote a poem about it. And then he painted this in 1840. And it was exhibited at the Royal Academy right along with Turner's poem. And an art critic bought it. And then an abolitionist from America came over to England and saw it and bought it and took it back to Boston with him. And so it was used to help the abolitionist movement in America. And that's why it's in Boston now. And so when you look at it, you see such a difference in your colors. You see this border over to the left of these beautiful blues and purples and grays. And even just above that, these beautiful oranges and yellows. And it's that what's over to the left versus that lower right-hand corner. And the right-hand corner is just carnage. The right-hand corner is body parts. And that is why the sunset is what people often refer to as a bloody sunset. The sunset is red and orange and yellow. And it is to echo the, like, literally the carnage that is taking place. Look at this versus this. Okay, so your theme seems a seascape, the power of nature, absolutely. But like, the horrors of humanity, suffering, that. You could also, we'll get later to more political art. This is definitely art for political purpose. This is a use of color. This is an emotional use of color. Yeah. So that is Turner. That is the end of video 1 for Romantic. I hope that you learned something today about romantic art, and I'll see you next time with our second video about romantic art. Bye, guys.